live.
Can someone send me the link if that's okay?
I'll text it to you as soon as I send us live. Okay, good to go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our Nutrition Month Let's Get Healthy events. Tonight, our very own committee member and registered dietitian, Shauna Del-Pret, will present our nutrition presentation. Thank you to our amazing committee and, of course, Shauna for tonight's event. Hope you all enjoy. And please don't forget about our recipe challenge for the middle and high school students. The deadline is March 31st. We're looking forward to some amazing recipes. Take it away, Shauna.
Thanks for the intro, Karen. All right, we'll get set up here. Share my screen. Okay, bear with me for one moment. Okay, great. So thanks for having me. Thanks for tuning in. March is National Nutrition Month, and it's just a great time to talk about our health and our wellness and how we can kind of add to that. The theme this year is personalize your plate. And I love this theme because I take it to mean that there is no one size fits all when we're talking about health. So if there's 100 different people, there's 100 different lifestyles that can be healthy. We don't all have to do the same thing to be healthy. And it's not about perfection. It's about what works best for you in the moment right now. So a little bit about myself. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. Basically, that means to become a dietitian, you need to have an undergraduate degree in nutrition sciences. Then you do a 10,000-hour internship, and you have to pass a national exam. So that's how you become a dietitian. I've had varied experience in the field. So I've worked as a retail dietitian in bariatrics. I've done some blogging and recipe development. And right now I work virtually in private practice for a company called Results Food Coaching. This has been a really happy landing spot for me because I get to practice my philosophy, which is basically we're more than what we eat, and the relationship that we have with food in our body is just as important, if not more, than the food choices that we are making. And I do get to help people get a good understanding of the nutrition science while building their confidence when making behavior changes. So it's been a great landing spot, like I said. I'm also a certified LEAP therapist, which I help people who suffer from chronic conditions like fibromyalgia, migraines, rheumatoid arthritis, and basically help them make some dietary changes to get some relief from their conditions. Outside of the nutrition world, I am a mom to 2 Willits students, so you might see them, they might crash in on this, but hopefully not. I do love being outdoors and doing anything active, and I'm forever a student, so I'm always reading and seeing what I can learn either in the field of nutrition and psychology. It's all fascinating to me. Before we jump into the slides, I do want to say, feel free to screenshot anything here. In fact, I'll highlight a few slides that you can screenshot. And I know you can always go back on YouTube, but it could be helpful to have some of the information right at your fingertips. So what I'm hoping you guys get out of this is basically an understanding that right now you're in this stage where your body is growing and kind of knowing what you need for growth and how do we build this really balanced plate that leaves room for foods that will support that growth and also the foods that are maybe your favorite foods. I'm going to hit on a few hot topics and then discuss some concerns with dieting, and we'll leave some time at the end to answer any questions that come up. So let's talk about meeting your needs. As I mentioned, you guys are in this great stage of growth. So from as young as 8 until your early 20s, you're really in this stage where you're gaining bone density, your organs are growing, you're getting gains in height and weight. And sometimes that's not spoken about a lot. So we have this stage of change, and it's not really mentioned that, oh, it's normal for our bodies to change. And that can be difficult. But I think being prepared for it and knowing that, hey, you guys need more energy right now than your parents probably do, can help set you up to make those changes to your lifestyle to help support that change and that growth that you're going through right now. And as we walk through this presentation, I invite you to think of calories in a different way. Sometimes calories get a bad rap, or we think, oh, we have to watch our calories, avoid our calories. I want you guys to start thinking about calories as energy, because then it shifts it to, oh, look, I'm fueling my body. Look at what I'm doing that's positive for my body. So if you are providing your body with the needs that you need, which we'll go through, you can avoid a whole host of concerns. And so I put down some concerns here that happens when we're not meeting our energy needs as we're in this stage of growth. And we'll kind of touch on a few of them as we go through. So what do we need during this stage of change? So there's three kind of main things that you will need. And they are your macronutrients, your micronutrients, and water. Macronutrients means large. So these are things that you need in large amounts, and they're your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fats. We're going to spend the most time on this tonight. And we're going to touch here and there on micronutrients. Micronutrients are things that you need in smaller amounts in your diet, and they include your vitamins and minerals. Just another nod that you do need to be hydrated. You need water. And a reminder that food, yes, I said calories equals energy, but food is more than just fuel, right? It's so human to eat and to be connected through food. And I think that's important to kind of notice that too. And it's not just about having this perfect diet that keeps me super healthy. It's also about sharing the connection, the community, the comfort, and the love that you can get with food. So let's jump in on the macronutrients. So we're going to start with carbohydrates and hopefully clear the air on maybe some misinformation or disinformation that's out there on carbs, and make it really easy to understand why we need carbs and how to work them into our diet. So we find carbs mainly in starchy foods, things like your rice and your pastas and your cereals. We also get carbs from fruits, vegetables, seeds, and dairy. So you can see there's a lot of different food groups that contain carbohydrates. And what we need carbs for mainly is energy. So they're the body's preferred energy source. And in fact, your brain and your nervous system, they run on carbohydrates. So they need it. And every cell in your body can run off of carbohydrates as well. Another important thing is carbohydrates in fruits, vegetables, and grains. They give us fiber, and fiber is important for our gut health and for our heart health. Along with fiber, you also get a lot of other micronutrients when you have your carbohydrates. And an important part is, as I mentioned, I should backtrack a little. When you eat carbohydrates, your body, through digestion, breaks it down into glucose. And that's the form of energy that our body uses. So when we have a dip in our blood sugars, which is glucose, right, it can trigger this intense craving or intense hunger, because the body's saying, I need glucose for energy. And a way to prevent binge eating is to eat carbs. Sorry, I didn't say binge eating. Yes, I did. A way to prevent binge eating is to make sure that you're getting in enough carbs consistently throughout the day, so you don't see those drops in blood sugars. So let's talk a little bit about fiber. So I did mention fiber is good for our gut. It's also good for our heart. But what is fiber? So fiber is the part of your starchy carbohydrates, of your fruits and vegetables that your body can't digest. So essentially, it's passing through your digestive tract undigested by you. But the microbiome, those good bugs in your gut, they will digest carbohydrate and they'll break that down. And that they act as food for them to keep your gut healthy. Fiber also soaks up fluid in your gut, and with that can soak up extra cholesterol, and it helps form this bulk so you can be regular. So I have pictured here 2 different grains. So I don't know if you guys have heard of refined and complex carbohydrates, but I'm going to go through a little bit of what the difference between like a whole grain or your complex carbohydrate is and what a refined is. So on the left is your whole grain, and you could see it has 3 parts. There's the bran, and that bran has the fiber and some vitamins in there. The endosperm, that middle white part, is mainly the energy. That's where you're getting the carb from. And then there's the germ that has some fat in there and some more vitamins and minerals. So when you're choosing a product that's considered whole grain, what they do is they take that whole grain, all three parts of it, chop it up, make it into a flour, and turn it into its end product. So let's say whole wheat bread, right? Now, the difference between that and a refined grain, something like your white bread, is in the refined grain, they soak that grain, they remove the bran, they remove the germ, and they just make the flour out of the endosperm part, which is just the carbohydrate. So you've removed the fiber and you've removed a lot of the vitamins and minerals that came in the whole grain. Sometimes products will add it back in, the B vitamins, but they usually don't add the fiber in. So on that note, you might look at a product like Fiber One and say, okay, I know I need fiber. Let me get more. But sometimes having fiber, what they do there is they take a product and then they add additional fiber in. And those added fibers can cause gastrointestinal distress. And they haven't been shown to have the same heart health benefits as just naturally occurring fiber. So some tips here is, if you're comparing labels to look for fiber, 3 grams is considered a good source of fiber and 5 grams is considered excellent. There's easy ways that you can boost your fiber intake, things like ground up flaxseed added to a smoothie or yogurt, or adding in chia seeds. Those are little fiber boosters. And just a note that if you are adding more fiber, it is important that you add more water, because if you don't have water, it's going to sit like a rock in your gut and can back you up and feel pretty uncomfortable. All right. So let's talk a little bit about low carb craze. I think this is something that has been trending for a while now, that I have to watch my carbs. I shouldn't eat carbs, or I have to limit how much I have. So let's talk about this. Is low carb this miracle? Basically, what happens is, I mentioned, you break down carbohydrate, it turns to glucose. So if we have a certain amount of glucose circulating in our blood, and it goes to our cells for energy. When there's extra, our body is able to store it in our muscle and in our liver. And with every gram of, it's stored as glycogen. So with every gram of glycogen that's stored, you're also storing 3 to 4 grams of water. So if you decide you're going to cut your carbohydrates out, once your body uses up that storage, it's releasing the glycogen, turning it into glucose. You're also releasing that water. So if you're looking at this as like a weight loss thing, that's water weight. And as soon as you eat carbohydrates, you're going to store it as glycogen and store the water. So it's not this miracle, weight loss tool to use to go on a low carb diet. Another thing that will happen is, I mentioned that your brain and your nervous system run off of glucose. It's the preferred energy source. And your body's really smart. If you're not getting carb in your diet, it says, hey, I need to get glucose somewhere to fuel my brain. And what it does is it turns to your lean muscle mass, and it turns the protein there into carbohydrate. So this is a very inefficient way to get your energy. And it actually kind of works against maybe what you're looking to do. So if you're trying to be strong and fit, but you're not providing your body the carbohydrate, it's going to break down your lean muscle mass and have an opposite effect. It's kind of like, think about, hey, you want to save money so you don't pay your heating bill, but you're still cold and you need to be warm. So you rip down your kitchen cabinets and you light them on fire to get the warmth. So it's kind of destructive. You saved money, but guess what? You kind of ruined the house. That's a little analogy I like to use. Another thing is, if you're an athlete and you're doing aerobic activity, you're really using your glucose for energy. And if you're not providing enough carbohydrate and refueling with that, you can experience what they call hitting the wall, where you feel like, oh, I'm tired. I can't run as hard or as long as maybe I did at the beginning of practice. So to be an athlete, or just a casual person who likes to move their body, it's important that you refuel and give your body the energy that it needs. So on a global level, your body doesn't know the difference between the carbohydrate in, let's say, bread or rice or fruit or candy. At the end of the day, it's doing the same thing to all of it. Yeah, there's differences in vitamins and minerals and fiber and stuff, but there is no such thing as an empty carbohydrate, because at the end of the day, any carbohydrate that you have does provide you with energy. So that kind of frees us up to say, hey, I can have variety here because it is giving me energy. Okay, so sugar is a little tricky conversation to have. I don't want to vilify sugar or say that sugar is bad, but generally speaking, as Americans, we get too much of it. And that could be concerning because if you're eating foods that have a lot of added sugar or contain a lot of sugar, you can displace other nutrients that you need during this important stage of growth. And that can also lead to you not feeling full after eating meals. So you can kind of continue to keep looking for more food because you're not getting what you need, those nutrients that you need out of food. And another downside of too much sugar could just be dental cavities, right? So there's two different types of sugar, and there's naturally occurring. So that's the sugar that you find in things like your dairy products and your fruit. So it's there. You can't. I mean, you can take the sugar out, but it comes that way. It grows on the tree, and guess what? The apple has sugar in it. And then there's added sugars. Added sugars are things like when you're making muffins and you put in sugar. So it's something added in the processing. So usually when it comes to sugar, what I say to do is take a look at, how much added sugar are you getting throughout the day? Do you find that there's a lot of moments where the added sugar pops up? Then there's maybe room to make some changes and some shifts in how you're eating and to swap it out with other things. Um, but the take home is your overall dietary pattern is more important than any one food that you're having in the moment. So protein, I think protein, gets touted as like the thing that you should have the most, right? Like protein first. Sometimes you see that in the headlines and in the news. And protein is important. We need it for growth and repair, for tissue repair, immune function. So the things that you kind of see listed here. Um, we find protein in a lot of different places. So protein comes from both animal and plant sources. And it's great if you get a variety in and you can have a perfectly healthy diet eating both, and a perfectly healthy diet, if you are a vegetarian. So it's not a values or a judgment to say which type of protein you're eating. A take home with protein, if you're very protein first and you're getting in excessive amounts of protein, when we break down protein, we turn it into amino acids, and we don't have a storage of amino acids. So the body will hang on to whatever it needs. And then essentially your kidneys have to work overtime to essentially pee out the extra, or it's stored as fat. So really the take home is you want the balance between the carbs, the protein, and the fat. Now, what about fats? So fat is essential. And I think fat's another one that sometimes gets a bad rap, but you definitely need it for your growth and development. It's a concentrated source of energy, and it also helps you absorb very important vitamins. So I don't know if you guys have heard vitamin D, everything with COVID and immunity. Vitamin D is very important for our immunity. And if you, let's say, took a vitamin D supplement and you took it on an empty stomach, you're not going to absorb as much as if you took it with a meal that has some fat, because it's fat soluble and the fat helps transport it to where it needs to go. So having some fat is important. You might hear too much fat is unhealthy, but I would even venture to say in your age and your stage group, not getting enough is even unhealthier. And if you're not meeting your fat needs, you could run the risk of not, potential growth disturbances, and potentially either not menstruating or losing your menstruation. So it is important that fat is included in your daily meal plan. So there are different types of fat. Your mono and polyunsaturated fats are the fats that we think of are liquid at room temperature. And these are the ones that we want to add and have more of in our diet, compared to saturated fat, which is the fats that you find more solid at room temperature. So if you look at, let's say, meat and you see like the marbling in meat, or you see like the layer of fat, that's more your saturated fat. And we do want to try to have less saturated fat. Trans fats used to be more of a concern because they used to be used in our food supply. Now, as of, I think, 2018, they took it out of the food supply because we know that it's now unsafe for us. So we don't really have to worry about that one. So this is one that you can screenshot here. We have different fats and omega-3s. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of omega-3s, omega-6s and omega-9s. So your omega-3 and your omega-6 are essential. And what essential means is that we cannot make it in our body. We have to get it from the foods that we're eating. So we do want to get these in our diet in a balanced way. So if you guys want to screenshot this, it kind of gives you a list of different foods, and you'll see that there, like canola pops up on all three of them because it has all types of them there. And fats like that, it can be a mixture of them. But look to add in more omega-3s, get some omega-6s, omega-9s for balance. So this here is just a reminder, adding in health with fat. So not to avoid fat, but to choose fat consistently throughout the day. And when you're choosing it, looking to get more of those poly and monounsaturated fats. So even if you want to screenshot this, these are some ways to get some healthy fat choices in. So adding ground flaxseed or having some olives with your salad. When cooking, learning to use the right oil. So if you heat something like extra virgin olive oil, which is a hard, healthy oil, if you heat that too high, you kind of denature the oil and then it loses its heart healthy benefits. So learning which oil to use under which cooking circumstances. So these are all suggestions to add in health with fat. Okay. So the next few slides, just a few notes before we jump in. They're meant for you to use together. It just was too much to fit in under one screen. I did adapt them from a dietitian who goes by the handle at Veggies and Virtue, and it's meant to be used as a cheat sheet. So in a sense, when I'm talking about meals, I say aim for each food group. So it's meant to be like, oh, pick one from this list, pick one from this list, and from every list that's there. You know, I didn't include things like cake and cookies and ice cream, not because you can't have it, but we're talking about, hey, what are we making the balance, the bulk of what our eating pattern should be? These are the foods that you're going to want to go for. And I do just want to note that this is not an all-inclusive list. There's plenty of other foods that are totally fine to incorporate, especially a lot of like different ethnic foods and cultural foods that maybe didn't make the list are totally fine to incorporate. So when we're talking about, well, how do we want to eat? What's that pattern that we're looking for? Generally speaking, you know, if you don't have certain health concerns that might change these parameters, 3 meals and a snack a day for most people should be okay. You know, that all depends on your activity level, you know, your gender, different things. So it's not a hard line in the sand. But generally speaking, aim for 3 meals and a snack. And then from there, if you're still hungry, if you notice that, hey, add in another snack, kind of respond to your body. But we want to eat consistently throughout the day. So when we're talking about meals, you do want to aim for each food group. You know, if you're in a rush or at a minimum, you want to try to hit on 3 food groups because that will get you a variety of different vitamins and minerals from each group and likely hit on that satisfaction factor, like, oh, I ate enough food. When you're having a snack, if you want them to be maybe more filling, it can be helpful to kind of combine foods. So a food that has a carbohydrate, so your fruit, your vegetable, your starchy food, pair that up with the food that has protein or fat. That protein and fat has a little bit of staying power, helping you feel fuller longer. And also to note that, let's say you only got 3 food groups in. So you had a salad with a sweet potato and chicken. Let's say that was lunch. Well, guess what? I didn't get my fruit in. I can have my fruit as a snack to make up for kind of what I missed during the meal time. So as I mentioned, feel free to screenshot these next few slides. So we have our fruits. For your age group, and again, the needs can vary depending on your activity level, but you want to aim for 1.5 to 2 servings of fruit. The take home here would be aim to eat the rainbow throughout the day. And fruits they come canned, they come fresh, they come frozen. All of them are perfectly fine choices. So they don't always have to be fresh. Maybe in a smoothie, using frozen is just easier. Go for it. It still has nutritional value. Fruit juice, just a note on that. Yes, that counts toward your fruit intake for the day. But when you do juice things, you wind up losing the fiber unless you're juicing it yourself and adding the pulp back in. But you wind up missing out on the fiber. So I would say to aim for whole fruit more often than the fruit juice. Vegetables, the recommendation is about 2 to 3 cups a day. Again, that can vary depending on activity level. Same kind of take home here, that you want to aim for a rainbow of colors, a variety of them to hit on different nutrients. So I'm sure you've heard carrots helps your eyes. So hitting on those orange foods has carotenoids, which do help your eyes. Hitting on the deep red foods, things like tomatoes, has lycopene, which is good for the heart. So it is good to get some variety in there. And same thing, fresh, frozen, canned are all good choices. So with your carbohydrates, remember this is where you need the most. So, 5 to 8 servings, depending on your age and whether or not you menstruate, your activity level. It can definitely vary, but take home here is variety, and also aim for options that do have fiber. So looking for things that are made with whole grains. And generally speaking, they say out of your grain choices, half of them a day should be whole grain. In your protein, there's a lot of options there. As I mentioned, not a judgment statement. You can choose animal, you can choose plant, but having a variety is good. Looking for lean sources, again, that's typically if you're looking on the outside of like a meat package, it will say lean, round, or loin. Those are signals that they have less fat, and that will be less saturated fat. You can also kind of look at a package and see the marbling, and an item that has more marbling or has more white, that white fat, solid fat, is likely higher in fat. So it could be a nice swap for you to make and find one that has less marbling. And then this is a list of added fats. So again, not to avoid it, but to focus on the ones that we know can help our heart health and focus on the type of fat eaten. So yeah, you can go through, you could screenshot it if you did that as we went along, or you can listen to the recording and screenshot it and kind of just, pick one, pick one, pick one, pick one, pick one. I built myself a meal. Or pick a carb and pick the protein. I built myself a snack. So what happens if we don't have time? I know you guys are busy, lots of activities going on, and we don't always have time to make a meal, or maybe we don't cook for ourselves. Maybe if someone's not around to have a meal, then we're not going to eat, or rushing out the door in the morning. Protein bars can be something to use to fill the nutritional gap there, right? Because being fed is better than skipping a meal. Something to be aware of. There's a lot in the market. There's a whole aisle of protein bars. So how do you know what to pick? Well, you can screenshot this. These are the parameters that I generally speaking say to be around. So if you have 7 to 12 grams of protein, that's going to give you a little bit of staying power, in the sense of you'll feel full after eating that. Look for 13 grams of sugar max. And with the fiber, again, a note that more isn't always better. So around 3 grams, if the bar has about 14 grams, that can cause GI distress. That can cause bloating. And if you're an athlete and you're saying, I'm going to eat this high fiber bar, and you eat it and you expect that you're going to go running, it could cause a lot of cramping and really impact your ability to kind of participate shortly after eating it. So those are the parameters. The ones that are up on the screen kind of hit the mark on that, but there's plenty more to pick from too, not just the ones that are shown there. Another option that can be a quick meal to throw together is a smoothie. So screenshot this, and this is kind of, again, add this, add that, and make it easy. And a little pro tip, frozen fruits and vegetables are just as good as the fresh, and you don't have to prep them. So that could be a time saver. And also, if you find a combination that you like when it comes to a smoothie, you can make smoothie bags up and just keep them in your freezer. Grab one, throw it in the blender, add your liquid, and you're good to go. Some other thoughts when you're doing grab and go can be something like pre-made egg cups that you make in the muffin tins, overnight oats, or even something like toast with peanut butter and a banana. So it doesn't have to be fancy. It could be simple, but fed is best. So just a note on one of the micronutrients. I said mostly we spoke about the macronutrients, but calcium is important. So when I mention osteoporosis, right, what do you tend to think about? I know for me, I picture a postmenopausal elderly person kind of hunched over, maybe with a broken hip or bone fractures. Those are all things that kind of pop into my mind when I think about osteoporosis. So that's so far off, right? The thought of being old and using a walker, that feels very, very far off for most people. But in reality, osteoporosis is a disease of youth. And the reason being is we're building up our bone density now. From, our childhood to the time we're about 30, we're building really strong bones. And one of those minerals that helps build those strong bones, as you guys could probably guess, is calcium. So you could see the two pictures of bone up here. The one on the left is dense, right? There's less holes, it's less hollow, it's strong and hard. The one on the right is one that, isn't very dense and is more likely to have fractures and breaks. So what happens is your needs right now is about 1,300 milligrams of calcium a day. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But if you're not getting enough, and about 80% of people your age group don't get enough calcium, you might not hit as high of a peak bone mass as you could as if you were getting more calcium in. And why that is problematic is because from about the age 30 on, no matter your gender, your bone mass declines. So it's at that peak level when you're 30, and it starts declining after that. And if you experience menopause, you wind up declining at a faster rate than if you don't experience menopause. So calcium is really important to get in now and into your 30s, so you have that base of peak bone density to kind of go off of. So I mentioned 1,300 milligrams is the recommendation. Generally speaking, you'll hear, hey, have 3 servings of dairy a day and that'll hit it. But not everybody eats dairy. And not everybody gets 3 servings a day, and if they do. So this is another list that you can kind of screenshot and say, okay, well, here are some foods with calcium that I can add in if I'm not hitting those 3 servings a day. And then if you feel like, hey, I'm still not hitting that 1,300 milligrams a day, there's an opportunity that maybe you do want to speak to a dietitian to see about how can I get more in, what's a healthy way for me so I can maintain my bone mass there. This is a good segue into milk and milks. So not a judgment at all if you drink cow's milk, if you don't drink cow's milk, it's total, everybody has their reasons for why they pick and choose certain things. This is more just an awareness that if you're not having cow's milk, it's not a direct equal swap if you're switching over to different milks. And I did MYLK just to differentiate. So the most similar to cow's milk is soy milk, and then I'd say pea protein milk. But the other milks sometimes tend to have less calcium, less fat, less protein, less sugar, and more water. So how that can impact you. Basically, if it has less calcium, we need to look for another source of calcium. If it has less fat and protein, you might notice it's less filling, so you get hungrier faster after eating it. So let's say in a smoothie, I used almond milk. Now you think almonds have protein, so you might assume that almond milk has a lot of protein, when in fact it doesn't. So if you use that in a smoothie, you might find, hey, I'm hungry an hour later. So you just want to be aware of that. So when you make the smoothie, you can add another source of protein to help keep you full longer. Vitamin D, we're gonna skip over. And so coffee, I feel like coffee has become more of a trend. You know, you go with your friends, you get a Starbucks, everybody's carrying it around. Um, Coffee is dose dependent, or I should say caffeine is dose dependent. So if you're in a smaller body, a smaller amount of caffeine can have a larger impact on you. And we really don't know fully the extent that caffeine impacts, how it impacts our nervous system and cardiovascular system. But if we're getting in too much, we do know that that can lead to sleep disturbances. You could feel your heart rate going. Might feel anxious. So, what's the recommendation here? Generally, the recommendation would be around 1 cup of coffee a day for children. It's slightly less for children, and then a cup a day for adolescents if you're going to have. Um, a cup of coffee has around 90 milligrams of caffeine, and a cup of tea has around 40 to 50. Another note is it is a potential source of added sugar if you like flavored and sweetened coffees and you're having them pretty frequently. Again, just could displace other nutrients that you could get from fruits and vegetables and other foods throughout the day. So, my little public service announcement. A lot of times I'll have clients say to me, "Oh, I didn't eat breakfast. I just had coffee and it held me over." Coffee is not breakfast. It's not lunch. It's not dinner. If you're drinking coffee because you feel like, hey, I need energy, I go back to where do we get our energy? We get it from our food and we get it from our sleep. So if you're having trouble fitting in meals and you find a heavy reliance on coffee, it might be time to maybe speak with the dietitian and figure out, well, how can I change things up so I will actually get energy from my food? Okay. A note on energy drinks. These another aisle in the supermarket that kind of has exploded with options here. An energy drink is actually a supplement. Supplements in our country are unregulated, meaning they're regarded as safe until somebody complains about it and says they have a concern with it. And really, anything could be in a supplement. Your energy drinks typically are beverages that have a lot of caffeine. They have not legal stimulants like taurine. They could have vitamins and minerals in there as well. And I'm hard pressed as a dietitian to say you should never have a food. There's really not much that I would say don't have. Energy drinks is kind of my asterisk. Like, we don't know the effects. If you have an underlying heart condition or an underlying condition, we don't know how much that energy drink is going to mess with you. So, and the reason being is that the amount of caffeine can really vary, being that it's a supplement. So some of them have as low as 80 milligrams, but some of the energy drinks have as much as 400 milligrams of caffeine. And we don't know the impact that that's going to have on someone. So I go back to my take home of get sleep and eat for your energy, because you might feel there kind of is a misconception that you're going to feel great after an energy drink and it just gives you the energy that you need. But the reality is there are some risks to it, and generally you'll feel a little bit of an energy boost and then a crash after it. So this just shows you the content of some. So a Red Bull, 8 ounces, 80 milligrams, but you look down at the bottom for the same 8 ounces, you're getting, 320. So almost what, 4 cups of coffee in an 8 ounce can. That's a lot. So let's talk about sports drinks. So do people use sports drinks? What were they formulated for? So they were formulated for athletes who do aerobic activity for greater than an hour. So going back to that carbohydrate piece in the beginning, you're burning your carbohydrate, you're burning glucose. That's what you're using as energy when you're doing these aerobic activities for sustained periods of time. And if, let's say, you are working out for more than an hour, you're kind of using up your stores. So these sports drinks are a way to get in a quick bit of glucose to give you energy. They're formulated to be very short chain carbohydrates. So you drink it, it breaks it down to glucose. Good, great. You keep going. You don't get any cramping. As an athlete, I don't know if you've ever eaten like a big meal and then went out and tried to run. well, you might cramp up. So these are formulated so you don't cramp up. You can use them as an athlete. They definitely have a place. In addition to the carbohydrate, they also can help quench thirst. It's providing you with some fluid, and a lot of them do have electrolytes as well. They typically don't have caffeine, so that tends not to be a concern with the sports drinks. And sometimes they do have protein in them. You can buy or make your own. And another thought is you can also kind of play around and see what foods also would give you energy. If you're not an athlete, I would just, and not to never have it, but again, look at how much am I having throughout the day. That can that's pictured there, or I should say the Gatorade bottle that's pictured there, that's like 4 servings. So again, it could be adding a lot of extra sugar in your diet without you really realizing it and displacing some other nutrients that you might want to get in. All right, so we're going to switch gears here a little bit. I put my email, we're going to talk a little bit about dieting. So if anyone feels, triggered or feels like they don't want to listen to this part, there's my email. You can reach out with any questions that you have. All right, so what I have definitely not all-inclusive list of diets up here. And I want you guys to think, what do these have in common? So I'll just give you a second to think about that. So as I mentioned, they're all diets. And what I see them having in common is that they last until they don't. They're generally speaking a rigid set of rules that if you don't follow it, makes you feel like you've done something bad. A lot of times they say you can't have X, Y, and Z food, or you have to cut out certain food groups. So they're very restrictive. I also see that, when you're in a dieting mentality, a lot of times it causes you to think about food more because you have this restriction going on. And of course, what we resist persists. And, I don't hate the dieter, hate the diet sort of thing. So it's not our fault if we've tried a diet before. I think diet culture is definitely out there. You guys are at an age where social media, social influences, there's a lot of pressure to maybe look or act or behave or eat a certain way to kind of have a lifestyle. We also, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So you can have well-meaning friends or family who eat a certain way and make you feel like, oh, I need to follow this certain eating pattern. So pop quiz. When we're talking about diets, what percentage of them have been shown to fail in the long term? So the answer here is 95% of diets. And this is talking about diets that are geared towards let's manipulate our body to lose weight. So there's a lot of diets out there that tout, oh, this is your weight loss solution. But the reality is 95% of them fail. And within 2 to 3 years, the person will gain the weight back. And then 66% of those people will actually gain back more. So weight loss through dieting is really not evidence-based. Going on a diet isn't necessarily going to help you with that goal. And rather, hey, can we widen our definition of health and move it away from weight? Because what the research shows is by making healthy changes to your behavior, you impact your health regardless of which way the scale goes. So I invite you all to think about this. This might be challenging some long-held beliefs. You might not have thought about this before, but I invite you to think of weight not as a behavior. So we don't control our weight. It's controlled by a lot of different things, genetics, our environment, our access to food. So what can we control and what can we hold on to? The things that we can control are, do we have breakfast or not? Do we feed ourselves throughout the day? Do we have movement that we enjoy and activity? Do we have stress relief techniques and whatnot? So those are more behaviors that we can control and behaviors that do have a true impact on what our health is. So I'll ask you guys, do you think dieting leads to eating disorders? So it doesn't, not for everyone, but dieting is the number one predictor of later eating disorder development. And if you are someone who has extremely restricted, or people who extremely restrict their diets in youth are 18 times more likely to go on to develop eating disorders. And if you moderately restrict, you're 5 times more likely to go on to develop eating disorders. So while not everybody does go on, it definitely is a significant risk factor. So I bring this up only to say that dieting doesn't have to be the way. We don't have to follow strict set of rules. Going back to that personalize my plate. Guess what? There's a lot of different ways to go about having health and having a body and being in a body. Um, some of the list of these things are items that I help my clients work on, and that I think that are very relatable and can, anyone can start anywhere with the things on these lists. I also think a special nod to working with a mental health professional if you do feel like there's excessive thoughts about food or body image and things like that. It does go hand in hand with working with a dietitian as well, as you're making some changes to your eating patterns. So my take homes for tonight's presentation is to let's start thinking about calories as energy. As if you're fueling yourself consistently throughout the day and hitting on variety, you've probably got yourself a good meal plan there. And I like to focus on, hey, what are all the great foods that we can add into our diet, as opposed to I need to take out or I need to remove or I can't have things. And also just the thought that your health is not your weight, right? You can't look at somebody and tell how healthy they are. And your weight is not your value as a person. All of those things are independent of each other. So this is just some thoughts on when to see a dietitian. If you have certain chronic conditions, if you have irregular bowel movements, if you're struggling with body image or an athlete, or you just want to learn how to have more balance, those are all times that might be worth seeing a dietitian. And again, here's my email if you have any questions for me. I also included some handles on Instagram of other dietitians and mental health professionals that can be helpful in helping you find balance in your lifestyle and make some changes if you feel that changes are necessary. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Shauna. This was amazing. I think I can speak right now for everybody here, April Sontag, Melissa Cappy, Allison Birch. We all thought this was absolutely incredible. And I'm sure everybody watching out in YouTube land agrees, including my son.
There.
So it was really fantastic. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I think that April Sontag was going to continue and let everybody know some more information about tonight's event.
Shauna, thank you so much. That was amazing. You brought up so many great facts. And for anybody who didn't catch the whole thing, you can watch it again on the Syosset Council of PTA's YouTube page. And also there's going to be a link on the Syosset Council of PTA's website if you would like to reach out to Shauna with her contact info. And just a little reminder that the Health, Nutrition, and Safety Committee is running a healthy nutrition contest, healthy recipe contest. It's open to middle and high school students. You have until the end of March to submit it. The entry form can be found on the Syosset Council of PTA website. We encourage everyone to send in their entry. You never know, and you get a chance to win some really cool prizes. And that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out and watching this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.